Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to GeekWatch, a subsidiary of the monastery, the open bar of the internet. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have two good brothers here in the temple, both making their triumphant returns for the first time in quite a while. We have the man who is usually late and fig. In fact, one could say that he is multiple years late and fig. Good brother Doku.
Cheers. Glad to be back.
And the and thank you, Ranma Leopard, for joining the temple. Hope you enjoy what we do here. And of course, in the blue corner, the man who's had to suffer more of Blizzard's shenanigans as much as me. Good brother Mace.
Good evening, good evening, good evening.
So, it has been a fair bit since we did anything comics related on this, and I always enjoy a challenge, and that is precisely why this particular subject matter is what we've got tonight. Well, tonight for some, today for others. Fucking time zones. Even worse with that whole 30 with some of those 30 or so minute time zones in some parts of Australia that I've been inundated with.
Yeah, our country's all over the place. I know that.
Look, I realize the joke is everything in Australia wants to kill you, but I didn't think time zones would be on that list too.
No, time zones, weather, animals, traffic, people, buildings. Just about anything in Australia, yeah, pretty much. That's it. Yeah, that's why we're a different breed. We are built stronger than others.
Some of it can't. They just want to.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, Beldra, what you mean is it can't yet.
Fair.
No, one of the deadliest spiders in the world actually doesn't have the pincer strength to pierce human skin. So it literally can't. But who knows? Evolution is a thing, and the way the world is going, I'm sure that all the animals become apocalyptic hell beasts at some point.
Yeah, just bring up the idea to Bill Gates. I'm sure he'll find a way.
At the very least.
Don't you mean Elon Musk?
I mean, oh god, can you imagine if both of them were in the same room together? Never mind. Off the rails. My apologies.
It's all right. We don't mind. We don't mind. We can go a little bit off the rails. It's just once we start talking the topic that we try to be on the rails.
Then the rails are going to want to kill you as well. Well, the rail's in Australia.
That's also true. That's why they're replacing them.
Yeah. Although I do have to curse whoever wrote that "Dumb Ways to Die" song because that lived rent free in my head for the longest time.
That was actually written as a part of a company here called Metro Trains. It was one of their promotional jingles because it was literally to stop people from walking onto the tracks or in front of trams and all that type of stuff. So they didn't expect it to take off the way it did.
Yeah. But there's at the very least, I'd imagine in some parts, helmets on bikes are mandatory because of Australian magpies during swooping season.
Well, yes and no. It is mandate by law that you are meant to wear some sort of helmet when on a motorized vehicle or even a an old school push bike. Um, but yes, the addition of protection against swooping magpies is a bit of a bonus at this point.
Yeah, especially since you get hit by one of them, they're gonna keep hitting you every damn year.
Yes, because the magpies remember people who are abusive to them. Whereas if you're friendly to them, they leave you alone.
Yeah, but getting back to the heart of the matter. So, one more day, the probably one of the more infamous um, Spider-Man story arcs over the last few decades. I'd say when it comes to infamy and story arcs with Spider-Man, a character who all of us have a long and illustrious history with. Um, I think the only story that has as much infamy is maybe the Clone Saga, and I will note this right out of the gate. I have no desire or no intention ever to do a reconstruction of the Clone Saga.
Thank
That's
God.
because it would take too long and there's too many versions of it to go through with.
Even if I did just the original, the problem is it didn't. It went on way too long for its own good and added way too much shit. Uh, I know that, and I'm trying to think of any other major stories that are just as infamous. I've seen some say Torment is close as far as infamy. I don't really think so. I mean, it wasn't great, but it was also the early days of McFarlane. So it was
Uh,
something that I don't quite know how to write yet.
the only other ones that would sort of come close to being on like a level of discussion wise when it comes to changing Spider-Man lore or anything like that, I think the next one in line would be the other, in which Spider-Man or Peter Parker goes through an evolution and gets the organic web shooters and everything else.
Yeah,
Becomes more spider-like, which is a big part of why we're discussing One More Day at one point as well.
yeah, and I don't think the other was bad enough.
It wasn't bad enough, but it was making changes to established law to put it in line with the movies, which a lot of people didn't like at the particular time.
Truth, though, although
But then again, if you're a constant reader like I am of Amazing Spider-Man, you flip flop on whether you want to drop this series, burn the books, or you want to actually keep reading, because they do a lot of things where the storylines are good, or they make bad decisions, and you're like, I just want to see where this train wreck goes. Like the Doctor Octopus brain swap thing for
Superior.
yeah, before leading into Superior. So Amazing Spider-Man 698 through 700, and then leading into Superior Spider-Man, which Superior Spider-Man wasn't a bad book, and then they go and reboot it, put Peter's brain back in control, and then just reset everything, which again we could complain about for hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be that's a running point of contention for me. But well, welcome to the comic book industry, at least Western comics.
Now, that being said, with this, I don't remember the issue number range. if I recall correctly, it was. I believe JMS was involved with the writing. Although, truth be told, I think the actual writing
It was
was probably Joe Quesada.
it was Amazing Spider-Man number 544, then Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man 24, Sensational Spider-Man Volume 2, issue 41, and concludes with Amazing Spider-Man 545. It was J. Michael Straczynski who wrote 544, Friendly Neighborhood 24, Sensational 41. Quesada took over for 545. But at the time, Quesada was also the editor-in-chief of Marvel and oversaw the entire storyline.
Yeah.
And that's who I have an issue with.
Quesada had, and the thing is, the details of this thing have been well known and well documented. Also, Coops, get your ass in here. I see you in the chat. If you don't get in here, I'm taking away your mead. But this is a story that has had long-standing repercussions, even now, and not just the Spider-Man universe has not fully recovered from it, but I would argue Joe Quesada has not recovered from it, because in the time since, both him and Dan DiDio have kind of made themselves into public enemies for this attitude of characters not being able to marry or something like that. Because I remember a few years afterwards, you had Dan DiDio claiming that superheroes aren't supposed to be in healthy relationships. Sorry about that, my mic cut.
I was just about to ask if it was just me or.
Yeah, I'm trying to, because people are saying, do I sound far away for you guys? Because they're saying that I do.
No.
No, you sound good. Yeah, you sound good for me, but also I'm in the chat and wearing headphones, so I'm not sure how it sounds for people on the stream.
Hang on. Okay, there's the problem. Hopefully it sounds better now. It was a case where OBS was still trying to pick up my headset mic. I think it reset
OBS.
after I updated it. That happens sometimes. Sorry about that, folks. But like Joe Quesada, ever since One More Day, I've seen Joe Quesada's name being treated with a fair bit of disdain. In some cases, full-on cartoon villainy.
Well, if I remember correctly, the reason Quesada had this idea in his head that, like, well, you can't have Spider-Man who's married to Mary Jane is needs to appeal to a younger audience, and so him being married makes him feel or seem older or something like that. He didn't think it was drawing in the audience that he wanted, and he came up with this idea of, like, you need to, like, retcon it or something like that. I forget exactly what the quote is, but that is my point of contention with him, because you're saying that, like, young kids can't relate to Spider-Man because Spider-Man is married and makes him come across as older. You realize they have parents, right? Like, this is just such a bizarre take.
How do you think kids are made?
Yeah, it's like, you realize these kids that you're trying to appeal, they have parents. Like, they can still look at Spider-Man and be like, oh, he's married. Like, maybe Spider-Man has a kid. Like, you're saying you can't do that? Like, no, we need to retcon everything. I think he said, like, outside of, like, a universal retcon, and it's just that whole idea, that whole mindset. It is actually what has driven me to, like, despise a lot of editors-in-chiefs in the comic book industry, or just editors in general, is this whole idea of, like, we need to retcon things to make it more relatable. No, just keep the story going. You don't need to retcon things. You guys do this all the time. It's become a trope on a trope on a trope. It is so insanely frustrating to have this, like, bizarre one-track mindset that I have never personally seen actually play out in the market in terms of like what people like or what people find relatable. I feel like it's just this weird, bizarre mentality that I don't know where it comes from, but I don't think it's based in anything realistic. It drives me nuts.
Yeah,
Yeah. With Quesada, he believed that the original marriage, the wedding, what was it, annual number 2, 1987, if my brain works correctly today. That was a editorial mandate, not so much one that made sense in storylines, and he just really didn't like it at all. And he basically made it a part of his term as editor-in-chief of Marvel, which he did. It was, I've got dates around here somewhere. He started as editor-in-chief in 2000 until 2011. And one of his biggest things was, as you said there, Doku, his quote is, "It's very easy to unmarry a character or fix something like that. You just do a huge universal retcon and say a few events in history didn't happen. But that's not the way we do it here at Marvel." Until he found his sort of inroad, which was Civil War. He found a reason. He found a reason to do whatever means necessary to undo not only what happened in Civil War, but everything going back to the wedding.
Well, and that's the thing that I guess that drives me nuts about it, because now that you've said it, I remember the quote, and it's just this idea of like you're going to do all of this plot line, story development, character development, only to say like, nope, it's all pointless and meaningless. We're going to retcon the whole thing. And it's like, well, what the hell is the point?
The argument that's often made, and this is an argument that I've heard from editors, from writers, from puff pieces, etc., is that it is hard for newcomers to get in to say comics or any sort of ongoing story when you have a large amount of backstory involved.
And the thing is, I don't believe that at all.
Yeah, I don't agree with that at all. Not these days. Like, you can jump on YouTube these days and get everything you need in like a 10-15 minute video.
It's not like any of us started with a #1 of any comic that we read when we started out.
No. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures, issue 1 by Archie.
I don't remember. As far as Marvel, I don't remember what issue it was specifically. I do remember that the arc that got me into Ghost Rider was the Midnight Sun arc with Lilith.
Well, the thing is, I know what very first got me started in a lot of Marvel comics. Even though, well, I'll mention this. One More Day was right around when I stopped reading comics, and I didn't get back into them until Marvel Now. So I took about a 10-year hiatus from it just because I was not impressed with any of the storytelling, and I also got busy. But what originally got me into comics had nothing to do with like issue #1 or reboots and retcons or anything like that. It was usually side stories and team-ups that I wanted to know like what else was going on with the other characters that I normally wouldn't have been interested in. And then I go find back issues, or I go start, looking into like, okay, what led up to this point? And that's like Hawkeye was one of the ones that I got into because I didn't really care about that character. But he was in one of the team-up comics. I forget which one it was. But I actually was like, okay, you know what? This character is not as gimmicky or goofy as I originally thought, at least not in this current iteration. And so I went back and found back issues, and I started reading those comics. You don't need to reboot the universe or retcon it. You just need to write a good character and a good story that gets people interested in it. That's it.
Yeah, that's the and when it comes to this idea of he needs to be single and the like, that it's often coming from an argument of just trust me, bro. Especially since
it's not even that though, Mildred. It's this stupid idea that is ingrained in. I hate to make it a generational thing, but in sort of the Boomer Gen X mindset, where comic books, cartoons, stuff like that, they're for kids. It's this ingrained mindset where those type of mediums are for kids and kids only. Adults do not enjoy them. Adults should not be reading them. Adults should not be viewing them.
Wasn't there?
Which is stupid. Which is stupid because if you actually look at statistics, the majority of comic book readers are older adults, especially nowadays. Like the average comic book reader is somewhere around about 32 years old these days. It's no longer for kids, and making comic books that are meant to relate to kids isn't going to be a sustainable sort of market tactic. Yes, you can do sublines for kids or something like that. You know, there's Spidey and Friends, a line out there that's specifically made for kids. Cool, it helps get kids into comics. But the thing is, you'll start kids with something like cute and cartoonish and everything else, and then they'll graduate into Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Or, the more adult-orientated style series.
I do recall one editor during the bankruptcy era that had argued that we have a lot of readers who for them a night with Elektra would be as good as it gets, and then he was surprised when everybody wanted his head on a spike, and made the problem even worse. That's what. But I would say this particular thing is it's definitely a generational mindset, and it's like when people say that people would say that animation was for children, which you look at the type of animation that's made quote unquote for children in the last decade, and can you really make that claim anymore?
Oh God, no.
Or if I want to use a Doctor Who example, do you remember a certain episode during Tennant's run called Fear Her?
Not off the top of my head, but I am re-watching a lot of it at the moment, so I probably are not up to that particular episode.
This is an episode that stuck in my craw, not because of what happened in the episode itself, even though it's not very good, but because of how the writer of that episode attempted to defend it, because he got a lot of shit for the episode when it came out, and he had said, well, if people were. He was like, I wrote it for a young audience, so if you have a problem with that, it wasn't for you. That's not exactly what he said, but that was the spirit of it.
Pretty much the same thing that Russell T Davies is saying right now about the current run of Doctor Who.
I remember when Chuck Sonnenberg, whose reviews of science fiction are always really fucking good, go look up SF Debris if you've got time, had said, I didn't know you could do that. That is so awesome. Here's what's going to happen. I am going to tear this crap episode a new one. Are you planning on objecting? Well, too bad. It's not meant for you. The idea of it's for that whole idea of it's for kids, so we don't even have to try, is definitely something that is of a certain era. I won't deny that. I'm not trying to delve into generational differences or anything like that, but that is something that I can't deny. In the same vein, I also can't deny that mindset ends up insulting both adults and kids, because you're making a product for neither of them.
Since we're on this brief topic, it reminds me of something that I had to, I looked up the other day, just because something reminded me of it. I don't remember what that something was now. But I think this brief intro monologue sums it up perfectly, and this mindset has been forgotten, so I would like to remind people of it. A boy has the right to dream. There are endless possibilities stretched out before him. What awaits him down the path, he will then have to choose. The boy doesn't always know. At some point, the boy then becomes an adult and learns what he was able to become. Joy and sadness forever will accompany this. He is confronted with a choice. When this happens, does he bid his past farewell in his heart? Once a boy becomes an adult, he can no longer go back to being a boy. The boy is now a man. Only one thing can be said. A boy has the right to dream, for those endless possibilities are stretched out before him. We must remember, all men were once boys.
That was Outlaw Star, actually.
Yep.
Um,
World of Desires.
Yeah, and of course, there's a reason. Even though I don't like C.S. Lewis, there's a reason I keep bringing up his. I'm not going to say I don't like him. It's more that I find him overrated. But I do think he was right when he talked about how the desire to be an adult or to appear adult from adults is Arrested Development. And that's kind of in that same vein. So I suppose the current state of the Marvel writing room is just a consequence of the predecessors being somewhat childish.
Well, and the reason I wanted to go with that monologue in particular is because, yeah, you do become an adult. You do get strapped with responsibilities. You can never go back to just being a child, like that much as a parent. But it doesn't mean that those childish desires or those things like ever go away. Like, as the quote says, all men were once boys. We always still have that little flame, that little, tingling in the back of our minds that we still fantasize about being great. We still want to be the hero. We want to slay the dragon. Mm-hmm. That doesn't go away, even when you become an adult.
Now,
or I guess the other saying is child at heart.
Yeah, because it's through all of the reason why I'm tying all of this into one more day is it's the revelation of a fundamental flaw in the writing mindset of a lot of people, and the way a lot of people treat media. I know that that J. Michael Straczynski is credited as the writer of this story arc, but if I'm being honest, I feel the real writer of this is Joe Quesada, and JMS was just doing it as essentially a contract job. I'm pretty sure he would. I'm pretty sure he would know talking about
there is a quote from Straczynski about this, which is, there's a lot I don't agree with, and I made this very clear to everybody within shouting distance at Marvel, especially Joe Quesada. There was a point where I made the decision and told Joe that I was going to take my name off the last 2 issues of the One More Day arc. Eventually, Joe talked me out of the decision because at the end of the day, I didn't want to sabotage Joe or Marvel, and I have a lot of respect for both of those.
Which is a very polite way of saying he's not a fan of how things came out either.
Correct. And to put a little bit of personal anecdote, I actually got to meet J. Michael Straczynski at one point, and I did have a discussion with him about One More Day, and because at that point I didn't realize how much Quesada had influence over the actual story. I started blaming Straczynski for it, and he's like, "Dude, no, like I started it. I wrote the pages, but the overall story design and everything else, that was 100% Joe. Like, I am so embarrassed to have my name on that piece of shit book." And like that was like, I apologized to him, but to get clarity straight from him that he hates this book. He regrets being a part of it. But at the end of the day, he was a writer who was contracted to write a story. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it's the editor-in-chief who says what stories get published and which don't.
Mm-hmm. I do think... It sounds like he was... Are you familiar with the term Alan Smithy? Because it sounds like he...
The name rings a bell, but... Yeah.
Well, technically speaking, Alan Smithy does not exist, but for the longest time it was a pseudonym for directors that wanted their name taken off a project. the name was retired in the mid 2000s, but the concept was still there. It's just that name wasn't getting used anymore. I have a feeling he may have been considering going that far, of just Alan Smithing his involvement. But with all of that said, what we essentially have is an attempt to try and reestablish a status quo that did more damage than helped, and really became a damning statement on the notion of needing a status quo in that regard. And because of that, one might say, why not just blow it up? Well, again, that's where the challenge comes in. So, let us have a go. So,
sorry. Before we go into the actual reconstruction, I just wanted to bring up one other thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the idea of Peter Parker going back to the sort of mid-20s era is what they eventually end up doing. Has a lot to do with one of the most popular books at the time, which was the Ultimate Spider-Man series,
mm-hmm.
which was written by Brian Michael Bendis. It was also Quesada had a lot to do with that book as well. I think that also played a big role in why Quesada wanted to do this big reboot that he wanted to do, was because he was looking at the numbers, and Amazing Spider-Man which is the mainline Spider-Man title, was getting beaten out by Ultimate Spider-Man, which was just a fresher book. But Ultimate Spider-Man eventually just became recreating Amazing Spider-Man storylines in a different universe for the most part, to the point where it got folded into the actual universe after the creation of Miles Morales.
Yeah. And
so, editorial has way too much to play in why we got this book started in the first place.
So, I had talked about this with you guys before we got started, but I do think that there's three pillars, 3 bullet points that I think we can build around, and still have a status quo at the end of the day, but not a regression, as it were. And those three status quos would be: one, Peter Parker revealing publicly that he is Spider-Man, since that happened in Civil War. There's no getting around that. 2, the consequences of him publicly revealing who he was. Even though it does, and whether or not that is Aunt May being in the hospital, that's something we don't necessarily have to do. But that bullet point should be in effect. And 3, making a deal with the devil, whether that be literal or metaphorical. I know that Quesada tried to claim that Mephisto isn't technically the devil, but
yeah, sure, whatever you say, bro.
Mephisto comes from Mephistopheles. It's about as ridiculous as people saying Chernobog isn't the devil in Fantasia. Yes, I know what the name Chernobog is meant to be, but you look at Bald Mountain, and how can you not see the devil in that? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Now,
Bilger, before we jump in, if you don't mind, I would just like to state that I have a clear bias towards this story. I don't like it. I don't believe it needs to exist. I understand why some people do like it. There are plot points that could have been better utilized. I believe the story could be done in a different way that would make more sense and would make for a better story. But ultimately, I'm firmly of the opinion the only reason the story exists and was allowed to be published is specifically because the editor wanted to retcon Spider-Man and make him not married so it could, in theory, appeal to a younger audience, which, again, I think is stupid. I don't like it. I'm clearly biased against it. So just bear that in mind.
It is important to admit one's biases. This is true.
Yeah, unfortunately, Peter Parker is a part of the Batman Club. If you write Peter Parker as a happy character with a good life, then supposedly people don't want to read that. It's the same thing as you don't like Batman to be happy or address his trauma, because without the trauma, you don't have the character.
Which is I'd say that's the mindset within the editors, because there has been a problem of just of constantly piling on more misery onto Spider-Man by certain writers, to the point where it borders on sad fic territory.
Well, yes, for the most part, like you rarely see Peter Parker in a happy relationship. You rarely see Peter Parker keep a job down for more than a few months. He barely has an apartment to live in most of the time. You know, he has to keep going back to Aunt May and living in the house. Anytime there has been any progression or evolution for Peter Parker as a character, it gets stripped away. Which we already brought up Superior Spider-Man. There was so much development during that particular storyline, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna swap the brains back," and Peter Parker loses his company. He goes bust. He goes broke, and now he's back living with Aunt May again. It's like, why do we have to keep resetting him to that particular point?
Well, the only reason I'll say, like, I understand why some people actually enjoy One More Day, and I can understand it, is because it does follow the events of Civil War. So, like, okay, I understand there are threads that need to be tied. It makes sense for the character because of what happened through the events of Civil War. I get it. But I just don't like the execution. I think it was very poorly executed, and I think it was a very lazy retcon to try to reset Peter Parker back to whatever it was the editor-in-chief wanted to do. And I just think it's lazy. I don't like it.
Because of that, for this, obviously, with the whatever shakes out with this reconstruction, a status quo would be set up, but it doesn't have to be, like I said, it doesn't have to be a regression. So I think the starting point for this would be dealing with the repercussions of that, and of him publicly revealing. And I'd say instead of opening it with that weird ass writing that was supposedly from Mephisto in the first few pages, I think it would be an interesting reversion of him being interviewed for the Bugle. Basically flipping on its head the relationship he had with that paper for most of his life.
Which would be problematic because due to the events of Civil War, Peter was under a lawsuit for misrepresentation or something in that regard, due to not disclosing that he was Spider-Man at it earlier, so it's like a contractual issue. They were suing him for multi-millions at the time, so unfortunately opening it up with an interview with the Bugle wouldn't technically be possible.
It doesn't have to be the Bugle per se. It could be any publication.
I wouldn't even do it with any publication. I think it would be better to sort of start this off with Peter himself thinking about the actions that happened in the Back in Black storyline, where the Kingpin put out the hit on him and Mary Jane, but accidentally got May, and Peter going and beating the absolute living crap out of the Kingpin in prison of all places, and basically take him down because he wanted to send a message of "you don't fuck with my family."
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to start anyway, you start with the fallout from that.
And
because there will be evidence of Peter Parker in the prison beating the crap out of Kingpin. So he's now realizing that every single action that he takes, whether it be as Spider-Man or Peter Parker, is having heavy consequences on him.
Yeah. And that's one of the few aspects of the storyline that I actually whether I like it or not is irrelevant. But following the events of Civil War and what Peter Parker decides to do, and supporting the Registration Act and revealing his identity to the world, and then seeing the ramifications and repercussions and how it affects everyone around him, and not just him and his closer associates and friends and family and loved ones, but also just the effect it has on the world as a whole. Trying to trying to come to terms with what that decision was, why he made it, what led him to make it, and then seeing the fallout thereof. I can see that type of character making sense simply because, like, normally Peter Parker is, your friendly, quippy, neighborhood Spider-Man. So yes, you can have kind of a darker, more depressed Peter Parker in a story that makes work, or that works, following events like that. So that part of the story I'm perfectly okay with. I think that works. This is more of an issue of execution
Yeah.
that I
We
Yeah, and that's like trying to keep to the pillars that Mildred put before us. It gives more justification as to why the eventual deal with the devil is made. Like getting a deeper look into the thought process of Peter Parker after such a strong event. And I'm gonna be straight honest that any reconstruction that I have of One More Day is going to involve the death of May Parker.
yeah.
I believe that she should have died during Back in Black. And that would be another thing that weighs heavy on Peter, which technically it did before he went and retconned everything.
And maybe I'm
But I
maybe
believe
I'm
she
wrong.
should stay dead is my thing to work into it as well.
Yeah, though as far as and obviously the reason why she was on death's door was her being targeted as part of an assassination attempt. Except since that was already done in Back in Black, I don't think having the Kingpin be involved with that attempt would be as good of an idea. Because then you're basically repeating the same gimmick back to back. So I think
Well, it's not so much the involvement of the Kingpin; it's the fallout from the previous book. If there's one thing that wasn't followed up enough in One More Day, it was the fallout of the decisions.
Mhm.
That's what I'm getting at. Like after he cops his beating him Back in Black, Kingpin's out. He's out of the storyline for a while. So, but you're still dealing with the mental fallout of making that decision.
Mhm.
Like you could like, to tie it back into your newspaper idea, you could have the headlines of the Bugle being the front page of that first issue for One More Day of Peter Parker beats up Kingpin in prison.
Mhm.
It becomes big news. People know he has broken the law, and he has put more pressure on himself.
Would you in that situation would you have Peter as a man on the run?
Yes.
I think in that there's a couple possibilities as far as who might take him in, and there's different ways that it could be done. You could so there's two options I see in front of me. One of them is somebody else from the superhero community, especially the New York superhero community, takes him in, even though they know the risks involved. Two, somebody who he's normally on the outs with, or is normally coming to blows with as part of his rogues gallery, decides to take him in. Which direction would you go? And who would take him in that situation?
Oh god, that's actually an interesting one. It depends on which way you want to twist the story.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to try and push things towards a more, like, he's trying to rebuild, but he's still on the run, you would have somebody like Captain America. But then again, Captain America dies not long after this, doesn't he? Like, there would be a part of that that leftover rogue element from the Superhero Registration Act that would still be around, and they would be the ones to take him and Mary Jane in. If you want to go, let's set something up for the future that could be a big payoff, Norman Osborn takes him in.
I was thinking the same thing, actually.
There were. I was thinking either Norman Osborn, or if I wanted to cause some chaos, the Heroes for Hire.
Yeah, probably not Hero for Hire, but yeah, Norman Osborn I think would probably be the more sort of comic bookish idea.
I'm trying to think. Around this time, was Osborn trying to turn a new leaf?
If I remember correctly, I think Octavius was.
Yeah, I think Octavius might be the go, because Norman Osborn worked with the Superhero Registration Act to build, I think it was a new West Coast Avengers?
The 50 States Initiative.
That's right, the 50 States Initiative, and he had his Iron Man knock off the American Patriot armor as well. So, unless it's Osborn taking him in for nefarious purposes, even Osborn couldn't take him in because he was working with the government at the time.
Yeah, I think Octavius might be the better choice, but I would make the argument it really depends on what direction you want to take the story. Is this going to be, and I know the editor-in-chief at the time would very heavily disagree with my first suggestion.
Well, fuck
But
him.
if you want to... Agreed. But if you want to follow up with the events of Civil War, and you want to keep kind of, I guess, the same sort of tone that One More Day had, then you're looking at a story that is not necessarily a redemption arc, but more of...
We don't have to keep the same... I never said we had to keep the same tone.
Well, I'm just saying, if you wanted to keep kind of the same tone and you wanted to make it a little bit more dark and, I guess, more adult-themed, which is weird considering the editor-in-chief wanted to appeal to younger readers, but that's neither here nor there. If you want to keep the same tone and make it a more dark story and trying to, like, reconcile with your past actions and then seeing the fallout of those decisions, then the story is going to go clearly in one direction. But if you want to make it more of a redemption arc, which in my opinion fits more in line with what a Spider-Man comic should be, then the story itself would go in a completely opposite direction. So it really depends on, like, what are you going for?
I'd go more for a how far can I fall before I have to reach out?
And that seems much more
desperation. It's more desperation than anything else. How much further can I fall? How low can I sink before I have to turn to the goddamn devil to pull me out of this situation?
Because of that, and given that Octavius was brought up, I think Octavius is the best puzzle piece that we can get in this, because even in the multiple times that the two have been on opposite sides, Octavius is too smart to have that level of hate boner for Spider-Man that others might. He is willing to see reason, which is more than can be said for some parts of the Rogues Gallery, but I digress. So, and I know I mentioned the whole turning a new leaf, but part of the reason I hinted at that is there's a concept in my mind that I think would work very well for this, of him being sheltered by, say, Octavius, and Peter thinking that the whole reason he did it was some sort of setup for later, and the twist in this is that there is no twist. Octavius just saw the bigger picture on things and decided to do what he felt was the right thing for his up until that point enemy.
Well, and I think Octavius works better as well, simply because if we're going with Osborn or Stark or anybody else, in my opinion, I don't think something like this would work. But if you introduce Octavius as someone who's willing to take in Parker and Jane, you're going to get you're going to get exchanges between the two of them because they're both intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one of their hallmarks. And you're going to see them pick each other's brains. And just the dialogue coming out of that would be fantastic. It'd probably be some of the best that has ever existed in Marvel Comics if it was done that way. And I'm actually more disappointed that we didn't get a chance to see that.
The
The only other person that I think would be suitable to house Peter and Mary Jane would be Doctor Doom, because
Doom would be interesting.
Doom would not only would he try and use Peter's situation for his own advantage, which would write some very interesting stories going forward, but you also have the fact that Latveria basically says "fuck you" to anything that the American government likes to do.
or pretty
So
much any
you could have, yeah, you could have Tony Stark showing up at what is it, Castle Doomstrut,
Mm-hmm.
where Doom is, and basically saying, "Hey, you're harboring a fugitive from American law. Hand him over." And Doctor Doom just walks out and goes, "Doom does not acquiesce to your request."
Mm-hmm.
So not only are you furthering a Spider-Man story, but you're also furthering the fallout of Civil War on a worldwide scale. So you're building two completely new stories out of that, and you get to see as Peter is now sort of in the middle between Doctor Doom, who gave him sanctuary when he needed it most, and the guy that he saw as a mentor, as a father figure in Tony Stark.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really good idea, actually. I like that one.
Yeah. And I was leaning towards Octavius, but you convinced me that Victor Von Doom might be the better approach, especially given all of the baggage that you can have with either Civil War or just the other people in the Earth end of the Marvel universe that he's interacted with in one form or another. And you can have that scene of either Iron Man or anybody from Shield or anything like that coming in saying,
"Oh no, it's got to be Tony."
Yeah,
it's got to be Tony. You can't put anybody else in that role to make the decree or threat to Doom.
Yeah.
But honestly, you wouldn't even have to completely toss out Octavius. It could just be like a 1-2 page panel of Octavius saying...
Well, the other thing is you could use Octavius as a bridging device.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Octavius takes him in and helps him get to Latveria through the underground means that the villains have to transport whatever across the globe.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically a situation like I can't save you, but I can help you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And just to address Ethereal Dragon in the chat, J. Jonah Jameson would not take them in. He almost had a heart attack during the reveal, and he is the. You got to remember, he's still running the Daily Bugle at the time, and they're suing Peter Parker for multi-millions at the time. There was no way J. Jonah Jameson would take them in.
Mm-hmm.
At that particular point. Not saying that the whole idea of J. Jonah Jameson being friendly with Spider-Man that happens way later in storylines can't be a thing. Like that could still happen, but you'd have to find a new way around it.
Mm-hmm. And what I was thinking at is I could easily see a scene where Iron Man is bringing not just himself but possibly some personnel from S.H.I.E.L.D. to demand Parker. And
he wouldn't just rock up in the Iron Man suit and say, "Hey, hand him over." He'd be rocking up with a whole battery of other heroes that have signed the Registration Act out the front saying, "You hand him over, or else we're going to make you hand him over."
Mm-hmm.
The threat is going to be there on a large scale.
Well, especially if you're going against Victor, because let's be honest, it's Victor Von Doom. You're not just going to walk in there solo and expect, I'm just going to win because, nah, bro. This is Victor Von Doom.
There is one dumb idea that I had in the process that might be considered a bit petty, but I could see, but part of me could see Doom doing this, and that is him creating a improved version of the Iron Spider suit. Not out of charity or anything like that, but just to show that he can do anything that Tony does 100 times better.
Oh, hell yes.
And that is 100% something Victor would do. Just not even just to prove anything, but just like, oh, your suit sucks. Here, like, give it to me for the next 6 hours. It'll be better.
Yeah. It's like, because at that point in time, like, Peter went back to the standard Spider-Man suit because he knew that the Iron Spider suit was had a lot of backdoor shenanigans put in by Tony. You could then sort of do a small Mystic Spider-Man arc where Doom uses his Mystic arts to help construct a new suit with different style of powers or something along those lines. But at the same time, you can use that as a device where Doom is now trying to change Peter's mindset. Because the whole crux of the story, with the introduction of Doom and Latveria and everything like that, turns more into... It leans more into that, how far can I fall? But at the same time, it's Peter also being manipulated. Because now you see, as Peter gets manipulated by Doom, Mary Jane realizes what's going to happen, which builds into her wanting to agree to the whole deal with the devil at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a good idea, because if you have Victor Von Doom, it gives you a reason to bring Iron Man into it, and it makes sense. It also has it also gives you a reason to have Doctor Strange involved in the storyline, which makes sense. And also, it explains, it would at least mirror the flip from Peter going from Iron Man's side to Captain America's side. It mirrors that kind of same story arc in Civil War. So yeah, no, I'm thoroughly convinced Victor Von Doom is actually probably the best choice.
Mm-hmm. Obviously through this, I wouldn't have as tempting as it would be to have some sort of open conflict between a bunch of superheroes and Doom. I would actually have it that some of the more stealthy heroes that Iron Man brings in try to sneak in, basically flipping what happened with Secret Wars on its head, which ends up making the problem worse.
Well, okay, you want to make the problem worse, and you want to bring other characters in. All right, Fantastic Four. You bring in Reed Richards and Sue Storm.
Yeah,
who are on opposite sides after Civil War, and they are the ones that come in to negotiate with Doom.
Let me raise you.
A sit down dinner meeting between Doom, Richards, and Sue.
Let me
like
raise you
that
one.
theme would be really well done.
Let me raise you one. Do we have access to the Human Torch around this time?
Not that I can remember. I think he went fuck it all and disappeared for a while. Him and Grimm walked off. They had very little to do with Civil War. They didn't want anything to do with it.
I was gonna say it's been a long time since I read Civil War, but if I remember correctly, they were only in like one of the plot arcs, and then they, well, as May said, they just sort of fucked off.
The reason why is because I ask is because of all the people within Fantastic Four, the one that Peter's had the best relationship with has been Torch.
Well, it would give you a good reason to bring them back into the story arc, and then you could get kind of like, your sort of like reunion sort of story at some point. So
yeah, you could have it that Johnny was there as well. You could turn Latveria into almost a refuge for people who didn't want anything to do with either side.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time that we've seen Doom side with the quote heroes or play the role of more of like an anti-hero or something. That's happened before, and I'm sure it will happen again. So yeah, bringing the Fantastic Four into it's actually a good idea.
The reason
and again it would play into the idea that I expressed earlier of Doom manipulating people.
Mm-hmm. And
So not only is he doing it to Peter, he could also be doing it to Johnny.
William Silva in the chat brings up, Storm was in a coma after being attacked by a mob after Stanford, and Ben had said, "Screw this," and went to France. It could be, if we don't have access to Johnny Storm, using Ben Grimm would be just as useful, because the point is, you have you essentially have the devil and angel on the shoulders with Peter. The devil in this is the more pragmatic end of things with Doom. The angel would be his relationships with either Mary Jane, with Ben Grimm, and so on. And he has to make a decision between those devil and angel on the shoulder kind of situation.
See, I wouldn't like. While Peter does have a good relationship with Ben Grimm, it wasn't. They were poker buddies, if anything. Like they weren't real tight friends like Peter and Johnny were. But Peter also had a lot of respect for Reed Richards, and Mary Jane saw for a brief time while they were in Avengers Tower, she was able to relate to Sue Storm because they're both women who are involved in superhero business as family. And that's going to be the other thing. It's going to be, you use family in this story a lot, which is why I originally suggested Reed and Sue.
All right.
Because they can then take that angel and devil dichotomy that you're looking at and sort of work with it. You know, it's like Reed could be like, hey, look, Peter, you signed the Registration Act. You knew what you were signing up for. He's the logic. Sue could be talking to Mary Jane saying, hey, look, I know Peter's on the run. We're going to try and help him. Give us some time to do something. And then you've got Doom as well going to Peter going, hey, you're safe in Lavaria if you just help me do what I want you to do.
And also that's a great dynamic to have, because you're gonna have the nature versus nurture aspect. You're gonna have the family unit, you know, the dad versus the mom looking at what the proverbial child is doing. You're gonna have the aspect of the arch nemesis and villain working essentially with each other. So you're gonna see a lot of contrast, dichotomies, parallels. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you could do just simply from a dialogue standpoint, sitting around a dinner table. That would be arguably some of the best storytelling you've ever seen in comic book history.
Yeah. Plus you've also got the fact that, you know, the Fantastic Four have that on and off relationship with Victor Von Doom. So you've also playing that aspect. You've also got the fact that the Fantastic Four are technically considered the first family of Marvel. So you're doing that using their experiences with the younger couple as well, but also at the same time, because Reed and Sue were also estranged at the time due to the events of Civil War, you could use that to bring them back together as well. So you're pulling multiple storylines and sort of having multiple resolutions for multiple books. And we knew Marvel loved trying to sell multiple books at the time, especially under the same storyline.
Well, and also because you're bringing these particular characters all together at the same time, you're really going to be able to hit home the aspect of family, loyalty, tragedy, loss. How do you cope with those types of decisions? Foreseen consequences, unforeseen consequences. I mean, there is a ton, like there's an entire book there and you could do an entire book where it's nothing more than the dinner table. Like, that's one book, and it would be nothing more than just dialogue, and it would be amazing. In my opinion, I think it would be amazing because you could really get to explore character, motivation, underlying themes. I actually like the idea a lot.
Let me raise that further. Because I can easily see how this is being set up. You have Reed and Sue trying to have a discussion about it, trying to be civilized about this conundrum, and Iron Man, because of the amount of mistrust going about, deciding to take matters into his own hands and having some of these superheroes he's brought in to try and sneak in, get Parker out of Latveria, while Doom is more focused on his discussions with Reed and Sue, and that ends up making things worse.
Yep, and then you have Doom save Peter once again, enforcing that Latveria and Doom are a safe space for Peter and Mary Jane. You specifically have Doom save Mary Jane, and that's the convincing point for Peter. But he doesn't realize that he's being manipulated more and more and more against his friends. You have Doom turn him against everybody. By the end of the discussions.
You have a chance for a really great 3-panel, maybe 4, where you see when Iron Man comes in and just wants to take matters into his own hands, breaks in, you see a rock or the ceiling or something falling down. It's about to crush Mary Jane. Victor Von Doom comes in, saves her, passes her off to Sue, and the last thing Peter Parker sees is Victor Von Doom holding up, a piece of falling slate or slab or ceiling as Sue takes Mary Jane away, and he just looks at him. Tell me that would not be an excellent 4-panel shot.
Yeah.
Oh, it would be absolutely brilliant. Even if you like, instead of Doom holding up, like, say, the Rock or something, you have Doom holding Iron Man by the throat.
Or stopping Iron Man from going after them. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the manipulation part. It's like, see what your friends have done. They've put your wife in danger. They've put the love of your life in danger. Doom would not do that.
And it's classic Victor Von Doom, though, because there's always an ulterior motive.
There's always an ulterior motive,
exactly.
but the thing is, with any sort of devil figure, be real or metaphorical, there is both a lie and a truth. Because technically speaking, yes, Doom would not do that. He also would, but he'd also take advantage if someone else did.
Well, and the other thing we have to remember about Victor Von Doom is he's intelligent enough to realize that ruling over a kingdom of ash doesn't make you a king.
See, the whole underlying thing for Doom, at least in my mind, would be that he sees Peter Parker as a stepping stone, as the beginning of Latveria having its own superhero army, in a way. As the more, if he can turn Peter Parker, one of the most true-hearted heroes in the Marvel Universe, to his side to attract other superheroes that aren't with the Superhero Registration Act, start to work with Doom.
Well, and there's also certain quote mystical characters who would definitely take interest in, say, turning the moral structure of the world on its proverbial head, and find that to be rather interesting, at least interesting enough to take direct action and get involved in.
Because from what I remember with Civil War, a lot of the supernatural end of the Marvel Universe didn't really get involved for one reason or another.
Yeah, because it was mostly a dispute about, it quite literally was a dispute about, can we actually really trust superhumans with our safety or not? And so that is very much a human conflict. But going with this plotline that we're building out right here, this definitely gives a very good reason for the more supernatural entities to get involved, simply because the rules are changing. The world is turned on its head. There is chaos. Like, this is, in Marvel Comics, at least up until this point, that was always a big part. There's more going on. There's a way for them to actually get involved outside of just the disputes of petty humans.
And there's also, like you said, with the supernatural aspect being brought into this, you could almost, one possibility to get to the end goal, which is the deal. I might even throw in the twist that it wasn't Doom that actually did all this. Doom's off doing something else. It's Mephisto pretending to be Doom.
Well, we already know in the original One More Day that Mephisto was, shape-shifting, changing, manipulating. So yeah, maybe it actually is Mephisto. You don't even really know at this point in time. It might be Doom, but maybe Doom was replaced. Maybe Doom wasn't even the one sitting at the table. It could have been Mephisto. You don't even know.
Yeah, exactly. And it could be that this whole thing has been about corrupting the soul of Peter Parker, because at the end, the marriage was something that was so pure, so ordained by God, that Mephisto wanted to corrupt it and rip it apart.
And that would fit
instead of the marriage as the focus. Instead of the marriage as the focus, it's Peter's soul as being one of the most pure in the Marvel Universe being on the line.
In that regard, and I realize this might be a bit of a stretch, but work with me. I'm somewhat reminded of one of the major arcs with The Dark Knight, because in reality, that movie was basically two sides fighting for the soul of one man. You had Batman seeing him as something that he couldn't be, that symbol of hope, and you had Joker who wanted to make him into another version of himself, essentially. And obviously, I'm massively simplifying that, but we are heading in that direction. As far as whether or not Doom was not being replaced by Mephisto, I would actually leave it ambiguous as far as which part of it was Doom and which part was Mephisto. The line I'm thinking is that a lot of the times when Doom was speaking with Peter, that was Mephisto. The times where Doom was speaking with Reed or with Sue or dealing with Iron Man, that was Doom.
Yeah, and you could even have say the event where, like, we have the save of Mary Jane by Doom.
Mm-hmm.
That could have been something that, say, Mephisto has set up in that regard.
Yeah, essentially putting Victor Von Doom in a situation where he has to save Mary Jane whether he wants to or not.
And he would still, even if he was aware about the manipulation, it still fits within his. If he was aware of the whole thing, it still fits within his goals.
Which is why he wouldn't even fight back against Mephisto. And it's like, you know what? No, I'm not gonna say anything. Like, if Mephisto wants to sit at the dinner table and I'm gonna sit here in my laboratory, I'll let them do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's all part of the plan. Which, let's be honest, Mephisto likes plans and manipulation just as much as Victor Von Doom does.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that as this thing gets further on, you essentially have Doom and Peter's relationship growing more and more, because in his mind, a lot of the people who he placed his trust in ended up not having his best interest in mind in his mind. He thought that, if I recall correctly, the reason he was ultimately talked into doing the whole reveal my identity thing was because Tony had said that he could protect his family.
He made the promise
Mm-hmm.
in the lead up to Civil War, or at least before the reveal, that he would do everything in his power to protect Peter's family from the decision of the revelation.
Yeah, and this ends up coming back to bite him, because during this whole invasion attempt at Latveria to get him, Iron Man is at the forefront of it, and with Mary Jane in danger because of this, that ends up fraying that relationship even more. It's like,
yes,
I put my family's life in your hands, and this is how you treat it.
which again, that would parallel what happened with Aunt May.
Mm-hmm.
I was just about to bring that up, because the reason I like the way this plotline is going is for 3 very specific reasons. 1, people already know who Spider-Man's identity is. Mary Jane and Peter Parker are no longer in New York. Iron Man is also pursuing Mary Jane and Peter Parker. They're at Victor Von Doom's castle.
Mm-hmm.
Mephisto is also there. If you knew all of that, and you're someone who had a grudge against Spider-Man, you already know who he is. How are you going to actually get back at him? How are you actually going to bring the maximum pain, knowing who Peter Parker is? All it's going to do is take a quick search to see what happened to Uncle Ben.
Mm-hmm.
You know what that did to him. So why am I going to go after the person with the spider sense when Iron Man, the Fantastic Four, or at least 2 of the Fantastic Four were there? They're at Victor Von Doom's castle. How am I really going to get my revenge on Spider-Man? Oh, I know. I'm going to target the one person who is the most vulnerable right now.
And you're also doing it after a point where you would have lost Aunt May as well. So Peter is still very much stricken with that grief of loss, and using it as a manipulation tactic as well. Because we could do it where we don't know what happens to Mary Jane after Sue walks off with her after the attack. Like, we could leave that revelation for somewhere down the line. Or it could be we bring that up as almost a note-for-note repeat of the Aunt May scenario. Because you remember, the one thing that spurred the idea of making the deal with the devil was that Peter exhausted all options to save Aunt May.
Well, that's exactly where I'm going with this. So I guess moving on to the second plot point, while all of this is going on with Richard, Sue, Doom, potentially Mephisto, maybe we don't know, Iron Man, there's someone who targets Aunt May. And now Aunt May is in the hospital.
Except now this brings the question of who would have the balls to actually do that with all of the volatility going on both in New York and across the universe.
I would have actually had Aunt May die in Back in Black.
I would disagree on this one.
She would have died before they go to Latveria, because if you have Aunt May still in the picture, Peter would not go to Latveria in the first place.
I would disagree on this one, because Peter should already have been on the run as he's going to Latveria. And while all of this is going on between Richard, Sue, Doom, potentially Mephisto, who knows, Iron Man, while all of that is going on, regardless of when it happens, doesn't really matter, but this happens sometime while they're all in Latveria. Someone maybe not kills Aunt May, but puts her in the hospital. We can still keep the sniper thing. That's fine. Keep the sniper thing. But they target Aunt May. They target Aunt May specifically because they know what it's going to do to Peter, and they know how it's going to change his actions and his actions going forward. And this is where I would say, this is where Victor Von Doom's plan fails and Mephisto's plan kicks in, because Mephisto should be the one behind it.
See, again, I think we're just disagreeing on the delivery method. I agree with everything you said there, where like the end game is there's a reason for Peter turning to Mephisto. But the only reason why I put the death of Aunt May in the previous storyline Back in Black is because that's where it canonically happened. And you know, you have and that triggers off the events of Peter going to Kingpin, beating the crap out of him. Thus, the story gets found out, and that's the reason why Peter's on the run. You have him not having dealt with the grief of Aunt May yet, and then you see Sue Storm taking what looks like an injured Mary Jane off to a Latverian hospital or something. And it's like, oh, she got hit with her head, she's in a coma or something, she might be dying. That combined with the grief of Aunt May's loss pushes Peter over the edge. And this is where he starts going more into the hands of Doctor Doom, but at the same time he's like, Doom, I need you to save her. I know you have a time window, and Doom's like, there are some things that even Doom can't do, or Doom won't do. That's where you need to start the reach out to Mephisto to build into that part of the storyline.
Especially since I think it would make more sense for Doom to say something like that than it would be for Doctor Strange.
Yeah. Like the idea here is you got to push Peter to snapping point. And seeing his wife end up in the same situation that his beloved aunt was in not too long ago, especially when not dealing with the grief of the death, would snap any normal person. And for someone like Peter to snap because of all of that makes more sense as to why Mephisto now gets involved, because he sees his opening.
You know, if we're going with that type of plot, that plot arc, with what we've developed so far, I would say the first couple of panels should actually focus on Aunt May being shot and put in the hospital by an unknown assailant. And I guess jumping more to the end of the story, this whole thing was done as a plan by Mephisto while Peter is on the run and unaware of what happened to Aunt May, so that when he finally gets to where he is in Latvia with Victor Von Doom, then he becomes aware of what happened to Aunt May, and that's when Mephisto's plan really starts to take shape, because he knows what it's going to do to him, and he knows what path it's going to drive him down, and it's going to make him more easily manipulated. So I'd say the first couple of panels is May being shot, May being put in the hospital, and maybe even Iron Man showing up in the first place was just to tell Peter what happened to Aunt May, but because he's at Doom Castle, there is an altercation. No, he can't come in, and that kicks off the whole thing. This is all part of Mephisto's plan.
Yeah, and what we're inadvertently developing is turning one more day into something of a tragedy, of essentially the fall of the House of Parker. You know, I won't say it's the exact same as the fall of the House of Usher, but I feel like this is something that would be a tragedy with a status quo that ends with the possibility of being able to build himself back up. And because of that, as things get worse, you do eventually have the whole thing with Mephistopheles coming into the picture. But I think
we've come up with two very good scenarios. Like you've got the fall of House Parker, but then you've also like the version that I'm proposing is more consequences have actions have consequences as well, both leading to the same point of Peter has been pushed so far. Mephistopheles sees a reason to get involved and to basically try and get Peter's soul or the marriage or whatever. And the eventual deal that being struck still gives us the result of Brand New Day, where you still have that reset back to that particular point that book starts at. We're just changing the delivery method of how we get to that point.
The thing is, this is... Sorry, I was just going to say, this is actually all perfect, because following the events of Civil War, Peter runs away. abandons Aunt May to try to protect Mary Jane, ends up having to turn to his enemies that are now quote quote allies, heavy quotes. Iron Man is Tony Stark is trying to come to help him, but because he's now being sheltered by Doom, altercations happen. When Peter finds out what happened to Aunt May, he's gonna feel guilty by abandoning her, with her being in the hospital and dead. He's also going to have Mary Jane being taken away from him by Sue, trying to protect her from Iron Man, intentionally or unintentionally. This is also going to basically every security blanket that Peter has now been stripped away from him, and now he's a prime target.
By the way, when we say Sue is taking away Mary Jane, can we put that in quotation? The word Sue in quotation marks, please.
Yeah, quote Sue. But now everything that Peter has had around him, that either he was fighting to protect or that was around him in order to protect him and keep his sanity intact, give him a reason for going on trying to continue to be a hero, all that has now been completely stripped away from him from one way or another. And now he is a prime target for a demon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like I could see, like the big thing that this takes out is the whole sequence where Mephisto shows up as the little girl, as Mayday Parker, because I thought that was probably one of the worst bits of One More Day, was showing them the possibility of the future. Whereas now changing it to a situation where it's become Peter's decision.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to coerce
Peter having to be selfish. He's like, I've had enough. I can't take this. I regret everything that I have done. Oh, did someone summon the devil?
And that's the thing.
You want those regrets gone? You want those mistakes erased? I have the power to do that. But I ask only one thing in return.
And that's the thing. You got to push someone like Peter Parker into a corner where he feels like he doesn't have a choice. It's basically Falling Down, but just done in comic book form, where it's like all of these tiny little puzzle pieces, these little seeds I've sown over the course. It would be nice if we could go back and do this with Civil War as well and drop like little nuggets that this was going to happen. Where now the trees have grown. It's starting to bear fruit. Now it's time to pick the fruit from the tree. And this is when Mephisto shows up and it's like, hey, Peter, I've seen everything that's happened. I've seen you recognize the results of your actions. I can solve it all for you. And it's only going to cost you a small price.
I can do that with a single color change to one panel in Civil War.
What?
I can't remember which issue specifically it was in, but when Peter brings Tony brings Peter to Avengers Tower, and he opens the door and there's all the superheroes before they even announce the Superhero Registration Act.
Mm-hmm.
One of them turns around and goes, "Who's that guy?" All of a sudden you see the Watcher. And Stephen Strange explains that's the Watcher. If he's here, something big's going to go down. You have them explain what's going to happen, but in the background of the panel, you have the Watcher, but he turns red. That's all you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's all you need to do. The quote-unquote Watcher that rocked up was Mephisto.
And again, that would make perfect sense.
All of it happened.
And it would make perfect sense for Mephisto's character as well. Because, let's be honest, it's Mephisto.
Yeah.
Don't need to say anything.
And the thing is, you can play it off. Like, okay, yeah, the Watcher was there. He saw what was going to happen. Then he went back to his non-compliance. But at the moment he did it, Mephisto sneaks in like a shapeshift form or something to just peek in to see what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all you need, is just one slight color change in one panel, and all this starts to make sense.
Yeah, and I will now. I know that an attempt was done to explain the whole why he wanted the marriage as the price for the deal, but the explanation always felt a bit of a stretch.
Flat. Well, let's be honest, Mildred. The reason that was the quote quote deal is because of the editor in chief wanting to retcon the story.
Yeah. So I think obviously every deal is going to have a price, but I honestly think that I have a hard time seeing Mephisto outright name what the price of the deal is.
Okay, so it's not just me.
You look at any kind of story that has a deal with the devil, and the price is usually only revealed, or the full extent of the price is only revealed after the fact, because of some sort of asterisk in the way that the devil says it, that is taken advantage of. This is why we have the phrase "devil is in the details."
I mean, the last time I saw a good panel with Mephisto was back when I believe it was. No, it wasn't All New World, different Marvel. I think it was Marvel Now when they had the Red Hulk Thunderbolts, and you had the Brain Dude, the dude with the large, very very large forehead.
The leader.
The leader.
Yeah, leader. And when they go to hell, and he's doing the deal with Mephisto, they're just sitting there reading, long scrolls worth of contracts. Like, that's how Mephisto operates. It's a billion words with one word being kind of the clincher.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to have a massive brain and you need to know all the little details. And so they go back and forth and negotiate. And Leader actually ends up beating Mephisto at his own game. Because that's the type of thing he does. Mephisto doesn't operate in brute force or anything like that. Mephisto operates in manipulation.
And
Just so we also have context as well, you said the details that you weren't sure of the details of the deal. I've got the page up in front of me now. So to quote Mephisto, have you thought for a second to ask yourselves why? Why I chose you two out of all the people? It's because yours is the rarest love of all. Pure, unconditional, and made holy in the eyes of he who I hate the most. A love like yours comes about once in a millennia, and to take that away from him, to deny him, is a victory like none other imaginable. So at the end of the day, it still comes down to purity. And while as much as Marvel doesn't say, Mephisto is the devil, he's the devil. The reason why he wanted the marriage in the first place was to deny God, one of the purest things that God has created. And you can leave that still. I still think the price of the marriage makes more sense now than it did in the original version. Like, our version, you have more of a reason why he wants to take it away.
And specifically why he's targeting Parker and Jane is it's not because he has anything against either of them. It's like, no, dude, this is far beyond anything like that. It's like, look, I don't have a grudge against you, Peter. I don't have a grudge against you, Mary. It's just you represent something that I hate, and I'm sorry, but
you represent.
I gotta destroy you.
You got to remember, his whole thing would be, I am here to corrupt, to destroy what he made. So, not only it plays into the whole, I'm going to take away the marriage because it's the most pure thing that has been made holy by God. It also becomes, now I can, like, you allowed the door to open, Peter, you are now corrupted. The most pure of you is now corrupt.
Oh, and also he's doing it in such a way that you're pitting family and friend against each other. You're turning enemy, hero, villain, ally. You're turning them against each other, and also making enemies into allies, allies into enemies. I mean, you're destroying literally every bond you could possibly have up until this point, until you're completely isolated and destitute, and so incredibly broken and desperate that you have no other choice but than to turn to the devil. And it all boils down back to one decision you made and a storyline that led up to this when you decided to reveal your name and identity.
Yep, exactly.
The only thing is that the only thing that I would have that I have an issue with in how we've had this set up is he wouldn't outright say that he wanted that. He would simply state that he would allow him something like he would allow him to start again.
Oh, in terms of the price?
The way that he sells the price.
Oh, it would be, I could take away the pain, I could take away the loss, I could take away the bad decisions. I can recreate and reshape reality at a whim. All I want is that was most pure to you and to him, your marriage. You give me that, I erase everything.
He would just say what
I will erase what is needed.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, here's what you do. You have a series of panels going back. Like Peter now is by himself. Mary Jane's been taken away. Aunt May's in the hospital. Victor Von Doom's nowhere to be seen. Iron Man's nowhere to be seen. Peter is completely alone. In the corner, by himself. He has hit rock bottom. He's starting to cry. You get a series of panels. First time you met Tony Stark. Iron Spider suit. His marriage. His wedding. Aunt May. Uncle Ben. The Fantastic Four. All the time he spent with them. Playing poker with Ben. All these wonderful memories. And then right when you get to him making the decision to join the Superhero Registration Act, it goes fuzzy. And he looks up, and he sees Mephisto. Mephisto says, I can give you one more day.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
Yeah. And as far I do think that Mephisto would say that he's not going to expect an answer now. He will give him a set of time, and he'll meet him again. You know, because an easy way to put pressure on accepting a deal is to put some sort of time constraint.
Actually, this would be the perfect time for a time skip as well. Don't even say what Mephisto's demands or anything like that is. Just in with the one more day, and then you do a time skip.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even do that. I hate time skips as an explanation. It's lazy. It's lazy writing.
Time skips.
Well, the reason
time skips have a purpose.
But I have an alternative situation.
Go ahead.
During Peter's trip to Latveria, in whatever method that they take, whether it's, he sneak over on a boat or something like that, he's just thinking back on everything that's happened that's led up to that particular point. At that point, the reveal, fighting with Tony, arguments with Mary Jane, putting Mary Jane's life on the line, Uncle Ben's death, etc., etc. And there's just a guy sitting across from him. Normal, everyday-looking guy. They get to talking. The idea here is to set up the idea that the guy is Mephisto, just talking to Peter, gauging what he would give up to take it all back.
Oh, here's what you do.
And you lean that, and that from there, you then also give Mephisto a reason to get more involved in the later parts of the storyline to help push Peter to the edge to accept the deal.
So no, here's what you do. Instead of having all the flashbacks and anything like that, yes, Peter is alone. Jane is gone. Doom is gone. Iron Man is now taking him back to a hospital because he's injured. And while he's being transported to the hospital, obviously under lock and key, that's when he starts remembering all of those happy memories. And then he finds himself in an interrogation room, and the person in front of him is interrogating him and asking him about his decisions. He's, again, still starting to get the flashbacks and memories. And that person who's interrogating him, that's Mephisto.
I really wouldn't try. I really don't want Tony to get a hold of Peter at any point.
No.
Because that takes away part of the tension. I know that there might be other ideas, but the one where he's talking to Peter is just talking to a normal person, or who he thinks is a normal person, gives sort of a foreshadowing of anything, or another part of the why are you doing this? What has led you to this? Because at this point, you got to remember, people know who Peter Parker is, and there may be others being smuggled out of the US to go to Latveria. Putting a normal person in that point really pushes the human aspect.
Well, if there's a fight going on between Iron Man and Doctor Doom, wouldn't it be safe to assume that Doom Castle is probably being destroyed?
Well, yeah, but again, that's would be something I'd do later in the story.
No.
Also, would it more where I'm going with this? Maybe you have a citizen of Latveria find Peter.
I don't think that. I see where you're going with that, but I don't.
A lot of it doesn't require fights. The only fight that really needs to be seen in the book is the manipulated one with Iron Man putting Mary Jane in danger. Doom saves her, etc.
Yeah,
that's the only one that needs to be seen, because that's a key manipulation point to push the last little nerve, or the last little bit.
More what I'm saying is put Peter in a situation where someone can come and find him in rubble or something. Not necessarily show a fight, but
you don't need to put Peter in any danger. Everything's happening around Peter.
Yes.
At this point, he is not going to get into a direct fight until the fight with Tony would be the one. Whether Iron Man flies into Doom's castle, breaking a wall, grabs Peter, and they start a fight. That's the only one that needs to be done. I think the idea of I like your idea of getting a citizen of Latveria. It could just be that Peter is just out walking, or something like that, and he meets a quote unquote citizen of Latveria, who he almost trauma dumps upon. And their answer is, well, what if you could make it all go away? What if there was a way...
That's kind of more the situation I'm talking about, though, is because if everything that is going on as we've explained it up to this point, it would seem a little bit odd that Peter is just kind of outside walking around, nothing is going on. I think it would be more convenient or at least it would make more sense from a storytelling standpoint.
I would follow that.
Someone shows up and it's oh, follow me, or I could help you. Or
he didn't. I see where this is going. Because
I'd tell you where I placed the scene after Sue and Reed get involved. That issue of the dinner table that we talked about. It could be that Reed and Sue start arguing about what Peter should do, and Peter's how about you both get the fuck out of my own life? Let me decide something for once, and he storms out. And that's where that particular that would lead into the scene that I'm describing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. No, I get where you're coming from on that one. Honestly, I think you could go either way with it. Either way, it still ends up in the. It still ends up where it needs to end up, where
Yeah,
you have hit rock bottom, and now the temptation kicks in.
yeah. Like you could set up the temptation almost like one of those suggestions that hits the back of the brain, and you set that up early because I like the idea of Mephisto giving Peter one more day, but like gives him that time to decide. But if you set that up early by stealth, you then the rest of the situation where you really push Peter into accepting that deal at the end makes more sense.
Because I do think at the end he does accept the deal, but you know how in canon there was that whole thing where Mary Jane almost talks him a little bit into it with that whole be my hero. I would instead go with the idea that what ultimately pushes him into taking the deal is just the culmination of everything that's happened up to this point, all the way since the one decision that he was talked into by someone he thought was a father figure, and all of that just being a collective straw that breaks the camel's back.
It would be Peter taking the deal wouldn't have as much to do with Mary Jane anymore. Like, she would be one of the reasons why he takes the deal. The whole thing of this would be everybody else but Peter has been in control of Peter's actions, Peter's life, Peter's decisions in this story. Peter finally snaps and goes, you know what? I'm going to be selfish for once. I'm going to think about me. I'm going to make decisions for me. I have dedicated my life to everybody else. And look where it got me. So I'm going to turn around. I'm making this decision for me. Because doing it that way, it removes a lot of the horrible bits and pieces out of those particular scenes. Like, I'm rereading the book as we're talking, and my god, the dialogue was absolutely horrible. Like Mary Jane almost convincing him to take the deal and then making her a little sub deal at the end was terrible writing. Like, she should have been trying to talk him out of it.
I remember one of the reasons
without her being there to talk him out of it, and Peter being in this selfish mindset, would give more a validation for the actions.
Well, I remember one of when Mildred sent me the DM to come join you guys. I remember seeing One More Day, and I'm like, I know what that is, but I didn't remember at the time. And then I went back and looked into it, and I remember I was like, oh god, I know exactly what the story is. I didn't buy the book, but I remember reading it, and I despised it for a very particular reason. And it's because the dialogue makes absolutely no sense for the character, and it completely changes like what the characters are at their core. And it was just, I was just like, this would be fine in anything else but Spider-Man. It just doesn't make sense for a Spider-Man comic, and that's the reason I despised it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, the dialogue, the way the characters were written was just wrong in every sense of the word. And that's where the more we've been talking about, the more I've been enjoying the way we're looking at this, because we're giving more justifications to the characters doing what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and how the end repercussion, which still leads to the exact same point that Joe Quesada wanted, which was to get rid of the marriage, but we have a better justification for it.
Yeah. That being said, the way I see it is that after the deal is done, he ends up waking not in the old house he had with Mary Jane, but in in a decent apartment, either somewhere in New York or somewhere anywhere. That part, the specifics of that aren't as important. But what is important is that there is the reset of of people not knowing his name again, but also in the time span, and this is something that can be done in like a montage of him doing what he had always done up until that point, and the realization of him no longer having that marriage, him being in a, actually I'll take back the whole reset to what he used to do, but the point is he's in a position where he's at his lowest after all the people who he ended up betraying, even if some of them may or may not remember. That's something that can be explored later. But he has the opportunity in front of him to rebuild everything. Because
I'd probably bring him back to being a lecturer at NYU.
So he'd have some sort of apartment or something in.
Yeah, he'd have an apartment. It's very plain, very standard. The only thing I might change is he has a doctorate on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
That because he's not as busy with some events, he's been able to go out and advance his life a little bit, but he's not married. You know, you'd see a picture of Uncle Ben and Aunt May on a counter or something as he's heading out the door, and he sort of touches it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so they've both passed. And it would literally just be walking out, and I'd go to that same ending where he ends up at the cafe with Harry, who'd be brought back and all that. And, you know, here's to a brand new day.
Yeah. I would be...
You still reset it, but you advance the character a little bit better than putting him back in the couch surfing position that he ended up in the actual book. But just advance him, and from there you could build almost like the single life of a 20-year-old or early 20s, early 30-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So you advance the character while regressing the time a bit. It's yeah.
Yeah. As far as if we were to do a follow up and call it Brand New Day, that follow up would be focused on him rebuilding his life, and I would be open to the idea of him getting set up with a blind date and someone who is very much not Mary Jane but looks very much like her, and that causes its own issues because he ends up getting reminded of what happened before, even if he's the only one who knows. So there's the question of, am I going to be making the exact same mistakes again if I go down this
route? Yeah. You could do something like that from then forward. I'd probably put that after the conclusion of this particular.
Yeah.
Put the storyline. That would be a different story. That'd be a different sort of bridging or filler thing. Like you call it the date or something, and you started out with Peter walking into a coffee shop, and the first thing you hear is "Hey, Tiger."
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes to a shot of somebody who looks sort of like Mary Jane, but isn't Mary Jane.
Yeah, and
then that would be its own separate issue to be played after the events of this story, though.
Yeah, and
yeah, I had an idea in my head as you guys were talking. This is how I would do it. Go with what Mace was saying, but have like an epilogue scene where it's only a couple of panels, where it's like Peter like walking into or out of an elevator or a door or something like that, and his spider senses activate, but he doesn't do anything like crazy or flashy. it's just a woman drops her, or is about to drop her coffee, but he grabs it right as it's about to drop. And he hands it back to her, and she tells him thank you. You don't see who she is, and he says something like, "You're welcome," whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Reaches out, shakes her hand, and you look at her, and it looks like Mary Jane, and he just introduces himself as Peter, but then you never see what she introduces herself as. It's just, it looks like Mary Jane. No dialogue bubble.
See, I'd say probably like the tiger reference would need to be in there because that would make it would sort of give that indication that it's possibly Mary Jane, and that would just piss off a lot of readers, which is what I'd use that particular issue for.
Or maybe,
give her
like
epilogue, but you never see her face.
Give her like a blouse or like some trimming or like something that has like a tiger pattern on it, so you don't even need the dialogue bubble, but it's the visual cue is there.
I think that's going too far into the weeds.
Too much?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Only people who know what that means would actually pick up on it. So yeah, fair point.
The idea that I'd be setting up with this kind of story seed is, even though we have this mandate of Peter's single again, he still finds himself pursuing a relationship, which is putting the question in the mind of will he end up using this fresh start to make the exact same mistakes again?
Well, that's the thing. You don't even really need to do that particular thing either, because you got to remember he's still friends with Mary Jane when it comes to Brand New Day. Like it just could be like I like the idea of Peter, catching the coffee or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it is Mary Jane, and it's just she turns around and goes thanks Tiger, and then just walks off.
Yeah.
You don't need to insinuate that he's going to be chasing her. It just shows that they're still friends, and they still talk and everything else. It's you don't need to see anything that they're gonna, because at the end, eventually down the line, you're gonna do something like a one moment in time or something like that, where they're going to have that sit-down hash out as to why it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
You will still have the idea that they're almost like two ships in the night. They keep coming close to each other, but they never collide. Because that's going to be the whole thing. Like, the Peter Parker Mary Jane relationship is going to be that eternal story.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I guess the only reason I really brought it up, and I like your suggestion, what you're saying, so it's not a criticism. I was just trying to figure out a way where, at the end of the comic, if it was me writing it, I would want the reader to question: Did Mephisto win or did he lose? And regardless of which one is true or false, what was his goal to begin with in the first place?
And I would say that as far as the answer to that, the mindset that I have is that it was a mixed bag, because there are, and this is something that I would leave ambiguous. There are other forces at work that have an eye on him.
Oh, and that's exactly what I would want people, because the reason is, I was saying, if I was writing it, I would want at least 3 or 4 options as far as like future stories that might touch on what we've discussed. Like, give me an option of directions to take things in based upon like what's going else, or what else. Excuse me. What else is going on in the Marvel universe? So like I can take this and easily apply it to something else and make it work and add some depth to that storyline and what's going on there. So I agree with the ambiguous ending. It's just I'm trying to present things in such a way that
you're trying to lay seeds for future stories.
Yeah.
But you got to remember though, at the same time, One More Day is used as a hard stop.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reset. It's a new point for readers to jump on. So at that point, any future story plans would have been thrown in the garbage.
Oh, and that's kind of why I hate One More
But-
Day and just the idea of retcons
However-
and resets in
however-
general.
However, if we were to write it, the three of us, we've hit a good stop, that hard stop point, which was the point of the book. So we've hit that. We got the reset. It's at that reset point from this, we'll just call it brand new day 2.0, is where we can start laying those seeds.
Okay,
I would use from that point onwards to develop those stories. One of which, and this sort of builds on your particular one there, Doku, is I would say, at least in my mind, that the Mary Jane Peter Parker relationship is an inevitability. You build up over time. I'm talking like years, decades, to the point where they eventually get back together, and you can you have the option of either having them go through relationship troubles, or the marriage returns. You can reinstitute the marriage at a later point. The idea would be that even with the deal in place, the purity and the love between Peter Parker and Mary Jane is stronger than any deal the devil can make. And it becomes an it becomes an inevitability.
I would also.
It will always happen.
There's a couple things I'd like to add to that. One of them is the idea that even when they try and stay separated, events, whether you want to call it happenstance or fate, keep having their paths cross each other.
Yeah.
The other thing is that I'd imagine there's a short list of people who would love to throw a monkey wrench in any of Mephisto's plans just to fuck with him. For various reasons. Not even because just because of the fact that Mephisto is involved with his own schemes. This particular individual would find a way to screw him over at the 11th hour on it. And I'm trying to think who's somebody who can't stand Mephisto more than anybody else who would try and pull that.
Johnny Blaze.
Yeah.
You gotta remember, an eventuality is that Johnny Blaze becomes the ruler of hell and outs Mephisto. So, yeah, we've still got that storyline down there. But I'd rather rather than have somebody doing it to fuck with Mephisto, I'd rather just have it be that their love is so pure and so strong that it is stronger than anything Mephisto can do to it.
Yeah,
I prefer that idea over somebody trying to change Mephisto's deal or something like that, or to negate the deal.
In that case,
because at the end of the day, it's their love which is the strongest part of both characters.
In that particular case,
it tells a better story.
In that particular case, instead of having, say, Johnny Blaze find a way to screw it over, he's there to rub salt in it. I.e., he knew this little stunt of his wouldn't work, but he was willing to let things play out just so he could see the whole thing fall apart in front of him.
You know, one of the better ways you could do this is, and I'm not sure how you would have Johnny Blaze and Mephisto see this particular image, but just to piss Mephisto off, let's say everything ends where we say it's going to end, and you go 10 years out. Don't even touch on this particular subject again. Just do everything, but just have a scene in a comic with a random Easter egg where you see our new version of Peter Parker and Mary Jane, or whatever you want to call her, just walking down the street holding hands with rings on their fingers. And that's what Johnny Blaze shows Mephisto.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to screw with it, be like, you tried everything you can and it still couldn't stop it. Because you don't
Yeah.
have to do a wedding thing. You don't have to do like they meet each other and date. No, just one random panel. Just a small Easter egg.
Yeah. And it is certain it is one might argue that seems a bit petty, but we can't understate the fact that Johnny Blaze absolutely despises Mephisto.
Well, and that's the thing. It's something he would definitely do because it is petty. It is a dick move, but it's the same thing Mephisto would do if he was in the same role. Like, it makes sense. Like, this is how you piss off Mephisto. You don't give him a fucking novel. You just hand him like one picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, that would be something that would be followed up in like a Ghost Rider book.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, in terms of the Spider-Man books, I believe a big part, and it's also become a really good part of the Batman Catwoman relationship in DC Comics, especially over more recent years, is that will they, won't they?
Mm-hmm.
That tease will keep readers coming back for years, and eventually you have the resolution of either you keep it up to the way things are now, where oh god, what's his name? Zell Webb, the guy who's writing the current books, absolutely fucked that relationship up. Which I absolutely hate, by the way. He's another dickhead writer and he needs to fuck off. But you can keep the will they, won't they nature. And you will always have the option of, you can always reinstitute the marriage at a later date.
Mm-hmm.
And it would just be that little, it would be just literally that. It'd become an Easter egg afterwards in a Ghost Rider book where, you know, it could be just something as simple as Johnny's going through Mephisto's files or something, like berating him. Here's all your failures, Mephisto, and he throws a bunch of photos on a table or something, and one of them is Peter and Mary Jane together again.
Mm-hmm.
Not even with wedding rings, just together again would be enough to piss Mephisto off.
And as far
But also, I was just gonna say real quick. Also, putting things like that in books that come like after the fact, especially years later, are really good marketing tactics because it's anybody who hasn't read the books or doesn't know, they're gonna hear about it online and be like, "Why is this one panel such a big deal?" It's a good way to sell books that are back issued and haven't been sold, or at least get like people involved and interested.
Mm-hmm. I think there's
To address the question. So what do we do with Pol? Pol never fucking exists in my universe.
Yeah, that was never going to be a thing. And he's like, is Paul working? No, in this story there is no Paul. Full stop.
Who?
Exactly. It's like the question of whether there's war in Bossing Say. There isn't. But I do in the aftermath. I do think the question of what happens with some of the other players in this should be considered. Like, would you have it that Doom or the Fantastic Four, the like, remember the way things were before that deal?
No. That would be part of the wipeout, because without the events of Peter revealing his identity, he doesn't go to Latveria. He doesn't. Those events no longer exist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things. To be honest, a lot of what happens post One More Day, I would keep a lot of it as it is, as it's been written. The only thing I'd probably change is probably a bit more will they, won't they with Peter and Mary Jane.
Mm-hmm.
Through the Amazing Spider-Man books. The rest of the universe goes relatively on track from where it goes from there.
I could
like while Peter, while the whole thing happens, like it again, it's using One More Day as that hard stop, as that new point for readers to jump on with the brand new day.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't be as massive an effect on the rest of the Marvel Universe, except for the fact that instead of people knowing who Peter is, they don't.
Yeah.
So obviously you would retcon and remove pretty much the story we just told out of existence.
Mm-hmm. And you have it that he's at this point essentially a professor at NYU, and I would say that that would be a very good lead in to have him acting more as a mentor role for younger superheroes or street level superheroes.
Yeah, it'd just be a different location that he's leaving from,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest, at the end of the day. It doesn't really make that much difference whether Peter's working at NYU or if he's working at a coffee shop or whatever. It's just a different place for him to leave from.
Yeah.
The only reason why I put the idea of he has a doctorate, he's a lecturer at NYU, is just to give some advancement to the character.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than have him go back to being on Aunt May's couch or Harry's couch or Betty's couch or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So let me
change of location.
Let me run another epilogue idea by you. So we see a Victor Von Doom and a Peter Parker passing by each other, and Victor Von Doom doesn't necessarily recognize Peter Parker as Spider-Man. He just recognizes him. But it's not the Spider-Man thing that really sticks out to him. It's that there's something more supernatural about it. And then he starts having ideas, or not ideas, but starts having memories of Mephisto and other things, other strange things that happened. And he starts getting more involved and interested in the supernatural rather than the scientific.
Which would lead off into an interesting, probably solo Doctor Doom series.
I would
just like as a seed plant.
Yeah, I would say if you went forward with that, he'd probably try and if he learned about Mephisto's involvement, he probably would not be happy that somebody else decided to step into his turf, and even more unhappy that somebody pretended to be him.
And see, that's why I think it could be actually a really cool story and a good seed plant, because, like, let's be honest, man, Victor Von Doom versus Mephisto, that's at least worthy of a four issue miniseries.
Oh yeah, like I said, it would be an offshoot.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be an offshoot series. It wouldn't be something I'd have play out in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man.
No.
That'd be a Doom sub-series, and yes, I would love that. That would be awesome.
And it would also be cool
but also you are referencing the loophole that was available. If Peter reveals himself to somebody, then they remember what happened.
And see, that's why I think it would be cool, because not only could you drop a lot of Easter eggs in there, but it would bring back in this idea of or an idea I had where it's more like Doctor Doom is thinking to himself, or not thinking to himself, but just has an idea in his head of, that's not Peter and it's not Spider-Man, but also it is. I forget the name of the series that did it. Was it All New, All Different Marvel, or was it Marvel Now? But there's one that they did the whole parallel universe thing, but they actually did it decently well as opposed to using it as a retcon. And it built on that idea of, if I know something, that's one thing. If I say something, that's another. Damn it, I wish I could remember the name of what that was.
I'm sure it'll come to you later on. But even though with this we end with a status quo reset. The big reason I wanted to tackle this particular story was to demonstrate that you can do a hard reset, or a status quo reset, or establishing a new status quo, what have you, without feeling like the audience has just wasted their time. And that's the important thing, that even if there's this new reset, it doesn't mean that everything that happened up until that point is magically invalidated for a phantom audience that may or may not exist, but that it actually mattered.
It's the difference between taking down a building brick by brick from the top down, rather than just hitting it with a bulldozer or what's the
Wrecking ball.
Wrecking ball. Thank you. Yeah, so that's the difference between the two. It's doing something subtly instead of doing it with blunt force trauma. And between the three of us, I reckon we have constructed a very good, laid out, thoughtful, even action-packed, like with decent action, some amazing dialogue scenes, like that dinner table issue. I reckon that would be one of those ones that would probably put up for like one of those writing awards, if anything.
Yeah.
And we still hit the same point that Quesada wanted, but we didn't do it in a way that would overly upset every reader. You still have people who'd be upset that the marriage is gone. You know, that's an inevitability.
But this way,
there'll be more reasoning as to why. Yeah, there's more reasoning as to why, rather than just, hey, I'm getting rid of it because I don't like it. It's we the events that have led up to this point lead up to this point for a reason.
I remember, I remember Harv Bennett being approached at one point where somebody had said that you can't kill Spock. This was around the time that Wrath of Khan was being developed, and he had said, "You can, you just have to make sure you do it well, because if you do it in a way that respects the audience, they're not going to question it." And of course, given the legendary status that Star Trek II has, I think he was right in that sense. Now, granted, there were outside reasons why the death of Spock had to happen in that thing, but that's something that's been well covered elsewhere. But the point is, with this, you have that reset. You have seeds that you can follow through in multiple books, in multiple ways, without feeling like that people need to read all of the side material. Since that is a bit of an, if there's anything that creates problems for new readers to get into things, it is the idea that you've got to go through all of this side stuff. A case in point is all the damn tie-ins when it comes to a given event comic. Whereas with this, you have ways that the lines can branch off that don't require a lot of extra unnecessary homework.
Well, I would make the argument ultimately at the end of the day, with how we've constructed our story, it's not insulting to the character, and it's also not insulting to the reader. Because, like, look, if you're going to break a character like Peter Parker and put him into a position where he's so desperate that he is willing to make a deal with the devil, then you have to show me Peter Parker being broken. You can't just say, "Oh, he's broken." That doesn't make sense, because the way it's presented, it doesn't make sense to the character. Peter Parker is one of those characters who would fight through the utmost adversity just simply because by his own nature and virtue. Knowing that, if you're going to take a character like Peter Parker and break them, you have to put the utmost effort into showing the reader that, yes, this character, this person, has been broken. So it makes sense. Because if you don't put the energy into that, if you don't put the consideration into that and make it believable for the reader, the only thing you're doing is you're insulting the reader. Like, I'm not even a huge Spider-Man fan, but even I know that the original story of One More Day was lazy. And I know it's lazy for one very specific reason. It was done because they wanted to retcon something, and it had nothing to do with storytelling. It had nothing to do with doing the character justice, and it didn't do anything for the reader. It was almost insulting. And that's why I have an issue with that type of storytelling. It's not done for entertainment purposes. It's not done to, again, produce a good story or advance the character. It's done because somebody in the editorial staff wanted to change something for whatever reason, and that shit drives me nuts.
And like the crux leading into into One More Day was the fallout from the decision made in Civil War. 90% of that book had to do with Aunt May.
When it really shouldn't have.
When it really shouldn't have. Our version not only does some of the things that they did with the Aunt May part, but we've also given more weight to the decisions that have been made and the outcome and the consequences that have come from those actions. We get to see more of Peter's mental strain, more mental and emotional strain than anything that was put forth in those 4 issues. Because 90% of it was running around trying to put Aunt May somewhere she could be safe, where she had a chance at life or bringing her back from possible death. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with One More Day. And it's still a problem to this goddamn day, is that Peter or the writers can't seem to let Aunt May go. Like, at this point, she's, I know we're time locked in comics, but technically she'd probably be over 100 years old at this point. Like, she should have died of old age by now. But no, we keep finding ways of bringing her back and having her involved in Peter's life. And, she gets a happy ending in more modern books where she got married and everything else to J. Jonah Jameson's dad. But she really doesn't need to be a part of the universe anymore. And it's sad to see writers still hanging on to her like a crutch. Peter needed to move on decades ago. Mm-hmm. A lot of the readers, like, I can remember, I started reading Spider-Man books when I was in high school, so probably around about the turn of the century, 2000-ish, was when I really started getting into Amazing Spider-Man books. And a lot of the books that I went back and read, he was an adult. He was married. He had adult issues. He had adult troubles. He, keeping jobs, finding ways to pay the bills, all that while being a superhero. And I kept going, when is he going to move on to the next phase of his life? When are we going to see more of those type of stories? Once One More Day happened, I'm like, okay, he is now stuck as either a perpetual teenager or a perpetual 20-something. And I'm 40 years old. I don't relate to those stories anymore. I relate more to his older stories, where he is an adult now. I believe that a comic book character should grow with its audience. And that is the biggest flaw with comics today, is that the comics don't grow with the audience.
And
if you want to start a new series for a younger reader, Marvel already had that. They had Ultimate Spider-Man. They regressed it back to when he was a teenager in high school. That whole audience, back then, they could have grown up with that book. Mm-hmm. Amazing Spider-Man is the people who were reading in the 60s, 70s, or even born in the early 80s like myself. That's our book. That should grow with us. But they don't want to. They want to keep regressing it back to those same years to try and get that same demographic, which, let's be honest, they're not buying those books anymore. They haven't done for decades.
Yeah.
It's the search for the modern audience bullshit.
There is no modern audience, and there never has or will be. It is I've described it as the grass is greener on the other side, but it's green because of all the radiation. And I'm of the mindset that this is another incarnation of something that I've talked about on this channel on multiple occasions, largely in regard to game design, but it's something that can apply just as well here. And that is design by gospel. The idea of we do things a certain way because we've always done things a certain way. And again, that is intentionally circular. Because it ends up leading to the idea that just because you've done it this way for a long time means it'll be perpetually the right way to do something. Even when outside context changes. That's why I did that whole episode about how the sim racing genre in video games is in this state that it is, where it's just spinning the wheels and not advancing, not even keeping up with its own competition. And
yeah,
as we've seen in the current market with comic books, if someone doesn't do that, then someone else is going to fill that void. But
we got the comment in the chat here. Mm-hmm. There is no more character growth for any hero anymore, which is true. It is very rare to see a book that will evolve its hero over time. Yet, some of the better stories have been ones where they look like they're about to evolve the character. I keep bringing up this parallel between what we've done here and Tom King's run on Batman, leading up to issue 50, which was the marriage issue. There was so much buzz and hype. Fans were getting excited to finally see Bruce get a moment of happiness where he would marry Selena Kyle. And yeah, okay, Batman's not much without his trauma, but you could still address trauma and still have a character still be, I am vengeance, I am dark, I am in the night, blah, 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 blah. The lead up to those books were some of the highest selling books that DC had in ages. Then they hit issue 50, where Tom King went and pulled the it's not going to happen card. And the book tanked.
Oh, it's the same shit he did with Mr. Miracle.
Yeah, but the thing is, fans want to see characters evolve. They wanted to see and do different stories. And keeping characters time-locked into one specific section, into one particular time of life, stagnates stories. It stagnates imagination. So if you want to grow and evolve your audience, you have to grow and evolve your character. Without that, you get what we are currently experiencing in the comic book industry, which is a bunch of dud stories by writers who don't seem to know how to write the character because they've grown up reading the books where the characters never grow. So they have no idea on how to grow a character.
But they do.
And that results in low sales.
And then spend more time gaslighting everyone else to saying that there's nothing wrong with the current state of things.
Correct. Because that's how they grew up with the books. You grow up with stagnation, you will push stagnation.
Well, I wouldn't even say it's stagnation at this point in time, and this is sort of the bizarre situation that the entertainment industry has found itself in. where it doesn't matter if we're talking about comic books, traditional publishing, Hollywood, TV shows. It doesn't really matter what area you look at. They're stuck in this weird position where kids are not consuming your product. They have YouTube. They don't necessarily care about physical comic books. Maybe you can sell them a digital copy if you're really lucky and you do some advertising on YouTube and the ad happens to pop across somebody who has mommy and daddy's credit card. The people who actually would buy your product, you're now actively trying to work against and exclude because, I don't know, do you think they're toxic for some reason? So there's this sort of weird atrophy inside the entertainment industry currently where there's a massive demand and no supply, but also an excessive supply that there is no demand for because nobody was asking for it in the first place. And in the meantime, the quote-quote modern audience you're trying to target is literally just a bunch of people on Twitter and TikTok and maybe making YouTube short video clips where they're just taking clips from your show that they didn't pay for in the to begin with and using it to try to generate clout on the internet. They don't actually consume your product. Like,
But I think
the entertainment industry is going to collapse simply because they're pursuing an audience that doesn't exist while excluding the audience that does.
Yeah.
the
And the lack of ideas and all that clout chasing then becomes what we have seen very heavily in the entertainment industry, which is replacing characters rather than
the idea
growing them.
of a character is a title or something like that, which
So we're gonna wave hello to Jason Aaron and Thor Volume 4.
if by wave you mean
The middle finger. The middle finger, yeah.
Wave with only one finger or two fingers if they happen to be British.
Give him the old Stone Cold salute.
Oh, the bowstring, huh?
Or the Onita salute.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like it was again brought up in the chat. Taking someone else's identity as James did to Thor is not character correct 100%. I was probably one of the first to jump on Jason Aaron when he made that decision, and I copped a lot of shit, and I still do to this day, because I have always said that you should not be replacing a character and using their name as a title. You know, they've tried that so many times. Like, how many times have they tried doing that with Miles in Spider-Man?
There was that whole what if story that was basically doing nothing but that, and all of them sucked. And we even talked about Miles in a previous episode of GeekWatch, and there were two things I had said in that one that I still maintain. One, stop trying to make him a poor man's copy of Spider-Man if you're gonna have him in that universe. And two, get him out of Manhattan. If you can't get him out of New York entirely, at least get him out of Manhattan and have him be mentored by someone other than Peter Parker. Like, fuck, have him work with the Heroes for Hire for a little bit.
Hell, have him go to the West Coast Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, have him on the other side of the country.
Yeah.
Have him anywhere but in Manhattan. Like, I know that they like the whole idea of putting him in, was it like Brooklyn? Like, he has part of that as his area because it's the culture and everything else. But in order to establish Miles Morales as his own character, as his own person, he needs to get as far away from Peter Parker and Spider-Man as possible.
And since he's going to be associated with New York in general and Manhattan in particular, get him out of there. West Coast, that would certainly be one way to
The one chance that they had was with this Ghost Spider Gwen dimension hopper that they've got.
Oh, fucking Spider-Gwen.
She could have taken him over to her universe, where Peter Parker was the Lizard of all things. And he could establish himself as Spider-Man over there and have his own adventures. But for some reason, Marvel doesn't want to do that because they don't want a repeat of Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 2, where Miles was introduced and created. They seem to keep wanting him in the 616, in the main universe. But he would do so much better in another universe of his own, like he originally had. And that's when his books were top sellers, was when he was his own character in his own universe. And it shits me that they can't seem to figure that out at all.
Honestly, I always thought Miles Morales would be a really good Spider-Man character if you actually put him in San Francisco. Not for any checkbox reasons, but simply because San Francisco has that a lot of the houses with like the bright neon colors and shit like that, and it's also hilly, so the terrain works well. It would just be a really interesting backdrop, just from an artistic standpoint, to see, like, again, bright neon colors and all this and that, and then you have Miles Morales swinging, up a giant hilly street. It would just visually look really fucking cool.
I had posited the idea of him being bitten by a wolf spider, and the reason why I say that is wolf spiders do not necessarily spin webs, but they are very, very good jumpers.
See, there's a lot of different directions you can take this. Like, it doesn't need to be like a web slinger or anything like that. They're like, just change the environment. Like, New York is, tall buildings, kind of flat. No, make it hilly. Make it like smaller, more historical structures. There's a lot of cool stuff you could do with
the reason
with Miles Morales' character.
You can have that same acrobatics without necessarily needing to do the whole web slinging thing. Just that,
like the jumping, or again, even just changing the terrain. Like, there's a lot.
How about we move him to Australia, because I'd like some more Australian superheroes, please. We have very little in the realm of Australian-based superheroes that actually get mainstream attention.
I can see that. It's just I wouldn't be able to
have him based off a Huntsman Spider or something.
It's just I wouldn't be able to write that because I'm not as familiar with the environment, with the cities and the like, as I would.
And that's the other problem. That's the other problem. Is that Marvel writers know, because a lot of them work in America, only know how to write American locations.
It's worse. A lot of them only know the tri-state area.
Yeah.
Which
I was gonna say, you're assuming they actually know how to write. That's rather generous of you.
Well, they know how to put prompts into an AI program that writes their scripts for them these days.
Yeah, but that's a whole other thing. And down the road, if I ever write a superhero RPG, I'm tapping both of you to help me world build that, just based on the results that we've had through this, because this has been a very fun endeavor, as these reconstructions often are.
Yeah, I wish that Marvel wasn't so strict on their copyrights, because like I would love to sit there and flesh out how many issues we'd make what we wrote earlier.
Yeah.
Get all those points down on paper, pay somebody to draw the art for it, and actually publish an alternative version of One More Day just to see how it would sell.
Yeah. But if that can't be done, then there are always I would be more interested in building a world of sorts, but that's another story. So with all that said, I think that's as good of a spot to end on a high note. We'll be back here next week with something else for GeekWatch. It won't be a reconstruction. I can promise that at the very least, but it will be something interesting. Because that's always how these things work. In fact, let me look at what we've got. We've got that. So Doku, I may have another stupid idea for you to engage in.
Oh no.
But-
Well, I'll happily accept, I'm sure.
Of course, I will be doing a couple interviews that I put up in the schedule, both on my server and on my Twitter. And this Saturday will not be the usual Sword World campaign as I mentioned yesterday, but instead, we will be doing a one-shot of Heavens and Heresies, and its creator, Tanner Walker, good brother Tanner, will be GMing that. Because we have a rule where the last week of the month I set up a one-shot with one of the designers that I've worked with over the years. And of course, there's plenty of stuff that's going to be coming down the pipe. So until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk, and join the watch.